Welcome, dreamers, to another journey through time's hidden corridors. I am your guide through the dreaming historian, where ancient mysteries whisper their secrets to those who dare to listen. Tonight, we venture into the enigma of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a tale shrouded in the mists of time, where stone and story intertwine like vines upon forgotten cities. Were these fabled gardens ever real, blooming in the desert heat like a mirage sustained by engineering wonder, or were they merely the poetic imaginings of ancient minds seeking paradise on earth? Before we embark on this mystical journey, if these whispers from the past resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle like, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing for more nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you are joining tonight's contemplation. Let our global community of mystery seekers connect across time zones as we drift together into the past. Now, settle into comfort, close your eyes, and let the ancient voices guide you into peaceful contemplation. The Euphrates winds like a ribbon of memory through the land once called Mesopotamia. Its waters wide, slow, and shimmering under the desert sun have carried whispers of empires, of gods, and of gardens suspended in the air. Long ago, beneath the bronze skies of antiquity, travelers spoke of a place where the desert bloomed vertically, where trees grew on terraces high above the earth, and where waterfalls sang the lullaby of paradise. They spoke of Babylon, a city crowned with grandeur and guarded by legends. Tonight, we walk its shadowed streets, not in search of gold, nor conquests, but of green, a green so lush it defied the dust. A garden that may never have been, yet lives on in every telling. Let us begin where all true contemplation does, with water. The Mesopotamians worshipped the rivers. In their cosmology, the Tigris and Euphrates were not just rivers, they were divine arteries. It was said that the gods shaped mankind from the clay left in their wake. Every brick, every wall, every seed that sprouted from Babylonian hands bore the blessing of silt and stream. To imagine a garden in such a place is to understand both the audacity and the genius of its people. In a world where heat cracked the ground like ancient pottery and dust danced endlessly on the wind, to conjure cool shade and climb an ivy was more than luxury, it was magic. Our story begins around 600 BCE, in a city already ancient by then. Babylon, under King Nebuchadnezzar II, had become a marvel of the known world. Its walls were said to be so thick that chariots could race across their tops. Its ziggurat, the fabled Anki, may have inspired the Tower of Babel itself. But amid all this grandeur, one structure captured the imagination of generations to come: the Hanging Gardens. Or did it? No Babylonian tablet has yet been found that names the gardens directly. No inscription boasting of their terraces, nor irrigation, nor flora. The Babylonian chroniclers, so meticulous in cataloging their king's achievements, are silent. Yet others, Greeks, Romans, and travelers beyond, speak of it with certainty. The historian Strabo, centuries later, described it as a marvel of engineering, with stone platforms layered like stairs, supporting trees and vines that cascaded downward like waterfalls of green. The Greek scholar Philo of Byzantium wrote of a machine that raised water from the river, hidden from the eye, feeding the garden in silence. How strange, dreamer, that the closer we are to the time of the gardens, the less we hear of them, and the further we drift, the louder the story grows. Let us walk through the tale as it has come to us. In our minds, we step across Babylon's grand processional way. The blue-glazed bricks of the Ishtar gates shimmer in the morning light. Lions and dragons parade across its walls in eternal vigilance. And beyond it, nestled within the royal palace complex, we find a sound that does not belong: a rustle, a breeze, the sigh of water. There, we are told, the gardens rose. But why build such a wonder? One tale, oft repeated, speaks of Nebuchadnezzar's wife Amidis of Media, a queen from the mountainous north. Homesick for the cool forests and rolling hills of her homeland, she longed for green in the dry, golden sprawl of Babylon. To soothe her sorrow, the king summoned his architects and ordered them to raise the earth itself, to defy the flatness of the land and mimic the mountains she missed. What a gesture of love that must have been, if true. A garden not for food, not for gods, but for the heart. A monument to longing. Yet here too we tread softly, for the tale may be a dream of later minds. The Greeks loved such stories: romantic, tragic, shaped like their epics. And still, there are the mechanics to consider. How would a garden rise against gravity? How would water reach its heights in a time before pumps and motors? Here enters the marvel of Mesopotamian invention. The ancients were not strangers to water-lifting devices. The Shadufa simple lever system, and later the Archimedean screw, attributed to the Greeks but likely known earlier, could lift water in stages. The Babylonians may have used a chain pump, driven by manpower or beasts of burden, hidden within walls, lifting buckets of water up through a spiraling path. Above, a system of stone channels and terracotta piping could have directed the flow like a river written in stone. Clay tiles may have sealed the terraces to prevent sea, while deep soiled beds supported the roots of palms, pomegranates, figs, and flowering vines, it would have required constant care gardeners, engineers, water bearers, all working in unison, performing a daily ritual to keep paradise alive. And what of the air? The desert is unrelenting. But here, in the imagined cool of shadowed terraces, mists may have formed where water met sun. The scent of jasmine and whetstone might have hung in the air like a prayer. Children of Babylon, walking the walls, may have looked upon the garden with awe, believing it the dwelling of a goddess or the gate to the heavens. Or perhaps it never existed. This is the strange pool of the Hanging Gardens. They are both monument and mirage. Archaeologists have searched the ruins of Babylon with care. The German excavation led by Robert Koldewey in the early 1900s uncovered what may have been a foundation of arches and vaults. Could these be the base of the gardens? Perhaps, but the location sits far from the Euphrates, making irrigation unlikely without massive infrastructure. Some have turned their eyes northward to Nineveh, capital of the Assyrian Empire. There, King Sennacherib built canals, aqueducts, and elaborate gardens. He described his palace as having trees suspended in the air, a phrase hauntingly familiar. Could it be that the Greek writers, centuries later, confused Babylon with Nineveh? Could the Hanging Gardens have stood not in the heart of Babylonia, but among the northern stones of Assyria? If so, then Babylon's greatest wonder may have been a borrowed glory. And yet, dreamer, does it matter? For centuries, poets and pilgrims believed in the gardens. They painted them in words and dreamed them into permanence. Like Atlantis, like Camelot, the Hanging Gardens need not rise from the ground to exist. They live in longing, in the collective imagination of humankind. In this way, they are realer than stone. As we step away from the river tonight, let us carry with us the vision of palms rustling high above dusty streets, of vines cascading like rivers through the air, and of a queen who, whether myth or memory, found her mountains in the sky. Let us now follow the story to its deeper roots beyond stone, beyond kings, into the very soil of dream. In the hush between history and legend, where time moves like wind over ancient dunes, we find her Amethyst Queen of Babylon, the whispering muse behind one of the greatest mysteries ever told. She comes to us in fragments, her name carried like a delicate scent through dusty scrolls and marbled halls. The Greeks spoke of her with reverence, as the wife of Nebuchadnezzar II, the ruler of Babylon at its zenith. But in their telling, she is more than a consort. She is the soul of the Hanging Gardens, the one whose sorrow birthed paradise. Let us breathe life into her, if only for a night. Amethyst was said to be a princess of Media, a land of rugged mountains and emerald forests, where cold springs gushed from granite cliffs and cypress trees reached toward the stars. Her homeland lay far from Babylon's sunborn plains. There, in the north, mist clung to the hills like silver shawls, and the winds bore the scent of cedar and snow. When she came south to wed Nebuchadnezzar, she entered a world of heat and gold. Babylon dazzled the eye, but its beauty was born of stone and fire, not forest. Its colors were vivid lapis blue, ivory white, burnt, ochre, but its soul was dry. What must she have felt, this mountain queen, stepping into the furnace of Mesopotamia? Did she wake in the night longing for the hush of snowfall? Did her heart ache for the rustle of leaves and the cool touch of river fog on her cheeks? The story goes that her husband noticed her melancholy. Nebuchadnezzar, ruler of empires and builder of wonders, had no shortage of ambition. He had conquered lands, raised temples, and restored Babylon to splendor. But here was a different kind of challenger. Sorrow he could not vanquish by sword or decree. And so, dreamer, he turned to architecture. Imagine it, a king standing atop his palace, staring at the empty horizon, envisioning a mountain where none stood, a mountain made not of earth but of brick and vision, one that would climb the air in stages, its shoulders cloaked in green, its spine threaded with water, not for conquest, not for pride, but for love. If this tale holds truth, then the Hanging Gardens were more than an engineering marvel. They were a poem, a love letter written in stone, soil, and root. Let us walk with Amethyst now, in the garden of legend. The sun rises over Babylon like a golden eye. The palace stirs with activity, servants preparing trays of dates and figs, guards in shining bronze whispering morning prayers. Amethyst, clad in robes of deep green, steps onto the terrace. Before her stretches a marvel. Stone steps spiral upward through hanging vines. Almond trees bloom beside banana palms. Roses open their petals to the morning light, and papyrus sways near small pools that mirror the sky. The scent of jasmine lingers in the air, mingling with the soft splash of water descending from terrace to terrace in secret rivulets. She walks slowly, each step drawing her closer to the sky. Perhaps birds nested among the olive branches. Perhaps bees, drawn by nectar, buzzed lazily in the heat. And all around her the desert receded, banished by dream and determination. From the highest tier, she gazes outward. Below her, Babylon breathes wide streets lined with merchants, the ziggurat rising like a stairway to heaven, the Euphrates curving like a serpent through the sand. But up here, Above the city, there is only green and memory. The garden is a bridge not merely of stone, but of spirit. A union between mountain and plain, between Media and Babylon, between longing and fulfillment. And so it was said by those who came long after, that the queen smiled once more. Yet here, in our gentle drift through time, let us pause, for there are voices that challenge this tale. Historians argue that Amytis may never have existed, that her marriage to Nebuchadnezzar was a later invention, crafted by Greek imaginations eager for romance and symmetry, that no Babylonian text speaks of her, that the gardens themselves may be misremembered marvels or transplanted tales from distant cities. But even if the queen was only a shadow, she remains essential to the myth, because the hanging gardens, more than any other wonder, are not just about architecture, they are about yearning, the human desire to bring beauty where none should grow, to recreate home in exile, to bend the world, if only briefly, to love. In every telling, Amytis becomes the symbol of that longing, whether she was a real queen or a poetic echo. Her story endures because it speaks to something eternal, the ache for something lost, and the hope that it might be. The poets knew this. The travelers who wandered the ruins centuries later, searching for green among the dust, knew it too. Even now, we know it. How many gardens have been planted in exile? How many balconies filled with potted rosemary and lavender whisper a secret tribute to lands left behind? The hanging gardens may not be real in the sense of stone and mortar, but they are deeply, profoundly real in the realm of human emotion. They remind us that sometimes the greatest monuments are not to power or victory, but to memory and tenderness. And so we follow the queen as she descends the terraces, her shadow long in the morning light. She passes fountains shaped like lilies, benches carved with mythical beasts, and pillars entwined with ivy. Behind her, the garden breathes, a living monument to sorrow and its transformation, a reminder that love, like water, finds a way. As we leave this green dreamscape, we carry her essence with us, not as a historical certainty, but as a sacred story, a story that now leads us deeper into the mystery beyond the queen, beyond the palace, into the bones of Babylon itself. Beneath the desert sun, Babylon rises like a mirage, its walls high and burnished, its ziggurats catching the light like stepped mountains of fired clay. This is the setting of our mystery, the sacred cradle from which the tale of the hanging gardens emerges, whether in reality or in dream. Let us walk now among the shadows of this ancient city, not as conquerors or tourists, but as pilgrims of memory. Situated along the gentle bend of the Euphrates River, Babylon flourished in a landscape where life clung to water like vines to a trellis. This was southern Mesopotamia, a region where civilization was born between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, where humanity first learned to write, build, and wonder. By the time of Nebuchadnezzar II, Babylon was a city of marvels. Its architecture followed not just function but sacred form, drawn from a geometry that mirrored the heavens. The number 7, holy and celestial, governed many aspects of its design. There were 7 gates, 7 temples, 7 tieds, each corresponding to a planet, a deity, a force beyond comprehension. The city was a map of the cosmos. To walk its streets was to move through the sacred, and at its heart, the royal complex, where myth and stone intertwine. Let us imagine entering Babylon through the Ishtar Gate, that shimmering portal of glazed bricks in hues of lapis and gold. Lions and bulls stride across its surface, guardians of the divine. Through this gate flowed the processional way, a ceremonial avenue lined with flowers carved in relief, their petals frozen in time. Along this path came kings and supplicants, gods in procession, and once perhaps a queen longing for mountains. To the left rose the Edamananki, the ziggurat whose name meant the foundation of heaven and earth. It towered above the city, reaching for the stars like a stairway of longing. To the right, the palatial complex, a labyrinth of courtyards, chambers, and walls thick enough to carry the dreams of 1,000 years. And somewhere within this maze, according to legend, the gardens lived. Babylon was not merely a city of buildings. It was a city of water, unexpected in the heart of desert. Canals crisscrossed the landscape like veins, drawing life from the river to feed the fields, orchards, and people. Engineers, scribes, and priests worked in concert to measure, manage, and honor the flow. Water was not just a resource, it was rhythm. It is within this context that the idea of the hanging gardens begins to make sense, not as fantasy but as the next logical miracle of an already miraculous place. The gardens, if they existed here, would have fit into the broader Mesopotamian tradition of sacred groves and temple orchards. In texts from Uruk and Nippur, we read of enclosed sanctuaries where trees were planted in geometric order, their placement aligned with the stars. These were not gardens for leisure, but for communion. To walk among their branches was to touch the divine. In this vision, the hanging gardens were not merely royal indulgence, but cosmological expression of vertical Eden that lifted prayer and plant alike toward heaven. Consider the terraces not as mere platforms, but as ascending stages of being, the lower levels with herbs and vines for the body, the middle with flowering shrubs for the senses, the uppermost with towering trisporum cedar olive reaching skyward, their roots held in brick, their crowns in sky. Even the placement of water followed this ascension. Like the rivers of paradise in Sumerian myth, water flowed from the highest peak, splitting into sacred streams that nourished the world below. It is said that from a distance, Babylon shimmered, not just from the heat, but from the glaze of its bricks, the rhythm of its geometry, and the silence of its intention. To live in Babylon was to be wrapped in symbolism. Every structure echoed a myth, every corner aligned with the turning of the sun. And so, a garden that floated above the ground blooming in defiance of nature would not have seemed impossible. It would have seemed inevitable. Yet here too lies the riddle. If the garden stood within the royal complex, why do Babylon's own records remain silent? The Babylonians were meticulous archivists. They wrote of trade, weather, dreams, stars, illnesses, eclipses. Clay tablets recorded temple expenses, canal repairs, and omens drawn from sheep livers. And Nebuchadnezzar himself left inscriptions boasting of his temples, walls, and palaces. But not a single word survives in his own voice about a garden raised for a queen. Silence, in this case, is its own mystery. Some say the records are lost, melted into the earth by time and war. Others say the gardens were never built in Babylon at all. Perhaps they were imagined by the Greeks after seeing other wonders in the East. Or perhaps, just perhaps, they were built, but meant to be hidden, sacred, a place of private devotion beyond the eyes of scribes and a miracle that bloomed in silence. To contemplate Babylon is to accept paradox, a city so grand it defies imagination, and yet so absent of evidence when it matters most. Its wonders are sung not in stone, but in echoes. As the sun sets over our imagined city, the bricks glow red. The Euphrates mirrors the sky in golden fire. And as the stars emerge one by one, the city once more becomes a mirror of the cosmos. Was there a garden hanging from its towers, terraces draped in myrtle and rosemary, watered by hidden wheels, or only the longing for one? We do not know. But we feel its presence. In the stillness of the night, when the city sleeps and only the river moves, we might hear the soft fall of water, imagined or real, trickling down ancient steps. A lullaby for a queen, a dream for the ages. And now, dreamer, as we pass from the sacred geometry of Babylon into the realm of distant voices, we will follow the echoes to those who first told the tale, not Babylonians, but those who came after, wandering ruins, spinning stories, and writing them into legend. As the last embers of Babylon flickered into the dust, the city fell silent. Its temples collapsed into memory, its inscriptions faded beneath layers of earth, and its towers once pointing to the heavens bowed beneath the weight of centuries. But the silence did not last. For though the Babylonians left few words of gardens in the sky, others came after them, travelers, historians, poets, outsiders who wandered among the ruins, and so perhaps with their minds more than their eyes a wonder blooming in the desert haze. From the ancient world's western edges came the Greeks. They arrived not just as conquerors, but as curious students of older civilizations. And among their many fascinations with the lands of the East, none lingered quite like the mystery of the hanging gardens. Let us listen, now, to what they heard. The first whisper comes from Ctesias of Nice, a physician and historian who served at the Persian court in the 5th century BCE, though his works survive only in fragments and second-hand accounts. He is believed to have been among the earliest to mention a royal garden in Babylon Lushel, elevated and remarkable. Yet it was not Ctesias who brought the gardens to vivid life. That task fell to others. Strabo, the Greek geographer of the 1st century BCE, gives us one of the clearest descriptions. He writes of gardens suspended in the air, built upon stone columns and watered by mechanical means. To him, this was no myth, it was an architectural triumph. Strabo never saw Babylon with his own eyes, but he pieced together accounts, stitching together hearsay and history into a vision that would endure for millennia. He was not alone. Diodorus Siculus, a Greek historian writing in the same era, offered an even more elaborate portrayal. According to his records, the garden rose in ascending terraces, each layer planted with exotic flora. The structure measured for plethora on each side, roughly 120 meters each space, layered with stone and waterproofing. The machinery to lift water from the Euphrates was hidden from view, operated tirelessly by men unseen. Diodorus credits the creation to Semiramis, the legendary Assyrian queen. Yet in other accounts, the honor returns to Nebuchadnezzar. The names shift, the details blur, but the garden remains. A wonder to the Greeks, such marvels were not just civic ornaments, they were proofs of civilization. They believed in order through form, in beauty through geometry, in memory preserved by architecture. And hanging gardens, as described by their pens, were sublime examples of all three. But here lies the gentle riddle. None of these authors, Ctesias or Strabogedorus, ever claimed to have stood beneath the shade of these imagined palms. They wrote at a distance, sometimes centuries removed. Their Babylon was already a shadow, yet they wrote with confidence. Why? Perhaps because they needed the gardens to be real. For the Greeks, the East was both a rival and a muse. Persia loomed large in their memory, both feared and admired. Babylon, as the jewel of that forgotten world, stood as a bridge between myth and fact. To preserve its wonders was to honor its mysteriant, perhaps, to possess a fragment of its grandeur. So they dreamed it alive. They dreamed of lush terraces in the arid plain, of water flowing uphill, of a place where engineering met, poetry and stone bore fruit. And in doing so, they passed the vision onward. The Romans inherited it. The early Christian scholars repeated it. The Islamic Golden Age embraced it. Medieval manuscripts adorned it with gilded drawings. And by the time Europe rediscovered classical antiquity, the Hanging Gardens stood proudly among the seven wonders of the world, as fixed in imagination as the pyramids of Egypt or the statue of Zeus. And yet, always the same caveat whispered beneath the surface. No one can find them. Unlike the pyramids or the lighthouse at Alexandria, the Hanging Gardens had no clear ruins, no visible remains. They lingered only in text, like a flower pressed between the pages of forgotten books. Still, the dream persisted. In the Renaissance, painters imagined the gardens as multi-storied palaces covered in ivy and filled with musicians. In the Enlightenment, philosophers debated their mechanics. In the modern age, explorers and archaeologists descended upon the sands of Iraq, eager to pull proof from the soil. Each came with the same hope, to touch what had only been imagined. But the deeper they dug, the stranger the tale became. For while the Greeks gave us beauty, they gave us confusion as well. The size of the gardens varies wildly across accounts. So does their shape, their location, their creator. In some tellings, the gardens are beside the palace. In others, atop it. Some claim stone foundations. Others describe vaulted walkways and spiral stairs. One speaks of cedar beams, another of tiled terraces. Like a dream retold by too many voices, the vision changes slightly each time. And so, we find ourselves drifting between two truths. One, that the gardens were real, their glory so breathtaking that it echoed through centuries despite the decay of stone. Two, that the gardens were never real, but so deeply longed for that the world agreed to remember them anyway. Which is more powerful, a garden that existed only for a time, or one that has lived for thousands of years in the mind? The Greeks, knowingly or not, gave us more than a description. They gave us a myth that moves, a vision that adapts to the culture that beholds it, a wonder that refuses to vanish. Even now, if you close your eyes, you can see it. Terraces rising one after another like steps to paradise. Trees casting soft shadows on glistening stone. Water whispering down channels carved with care. And above it all, the sky blue and endless, holding the dream gently in place. Let us now follow this vision as it paths into a new set of hands, not those of poets, but of seekers with spades and notebooks. For while the Greeks imagined, others sought to uncover, and in the sands of Babylon they found something unexpected. When the tales of the Hanging Gardens echoed through Renaissance libraries and Enlightenment salons, they stirred not only the imagination but a new desire to find them. The dream had lasted for millennia. Now it called to the modern world with a different tone. Not poetry, but proof. Not myth, but measurement. Could this wonder so long preserved in ink and dream be found beneath the sands? The first to heed this call with tools in hand was a man named Robert Koldewey. At the dawn of the 20th century, Koldewey, a German archaeologist fueled by both scholarship and longing, led one of the most ambitious excavations in the ancient Near East. In 1899, he arrived at the site of Hela near the banks of the Euphrates, in what is now modern-day Iraq. What lay before him was not the gleaming Babylon of Strabo or it was a fractured field of mounds, half swallowed by time, scorched by sun, and veiled by silence. But Koldewey saw more. Armed with cuneiform fragments, maps, and tireless conviction, he and his team began to dig. What they uncovered would reshape our understanding of Babylon, but also deepen the mystery of its most famous myth. He found walls, towering walls, their mud bricks still bearing the names of Nebuchadnezzar II. He found gates, roads, temples, foundations of ziggurats and palaces. The city once drawn from dust rose again beneath his feet, layer by crumbling layer. And then he found something curious, a series of vaulted cellars, deep beneath what may have been part of the royal complex. Thick walls made of stone unusual in Babylon, where sun-reed mud brick reigned supreme. The structure had 14 large rooms aligned in a row, each with stone arches and what appeared to be a network of drains or channels. Koldewey believed he had found it. To him, this was the mechanical heart of the Hanging Gardens, the stone substructure strong enough to support terraces above, the channels for irrigation, the architectural bones of paradise. He sketched them, studied them, and published his findings with cautious reverence. The location, however, puzzled many. These ruins were far from the Euphrates, further than expected for a garden said to be watered from its depths. Koldewey offered a possibility that the Euphrates had changed course over the centuries. Rivers, after all, meander and shift. Perhaps the ancient waterline once flowed closer to this foundation. The channels he found, he argued, supported this theory, but not everyone agreed. Later scholars questioned the identification. The vaulted rooms may have been storage areas, the channels not for irrigation, but for drainage or ventilation. The absence of any decorative elements, floral carvings, inscriptions, garden motifs cast doubt on the romantic theory. Still, the vision persisted. For over a century, Coldwell's discovery remained the strongest archaeological candidate for the garden. No other site in Babylon offered such robust, anomalous architecture. But as dreams often do, the vision began to shift. In the late 20th century, a new voice entered the mystery doctor Stephanie Daly, an Oxford Assyriologist whose scholarship, like a breeze through long-closed chambers, stirred the sands of assumption. Daly delved into the cuneiform texts with fresh eyes. She noted a recurring absence. The Babylonian inscriptions, so plentiful in describing Nebuchadnezzar's works, made no mention of a grand garden, nor did they describe any massive water-lifting mechanisms in the royal precinct. But in the Assyrian capital of Nineveh, far to the north, she found echoes. King Sennacherib, who ruled Assyria a century before Nebuchadnezzar, left behind inscriptions boasting of technological marvels, aqueducts, canals, and a water-raising screw-like device. His palace described lush gardens, watered year-round by engineering feats, and most intriguingly referred to trees planted on roofs and terraces. Daly proposed a radical thought. What if the Hanging Gardens were not in Babylon at all? What if the Greeks, writing centuries later, had confused the two great Mesopotamian cities, Babylon and Nineveh, and attributed to one what belonged to the other? It was not a far-fetched mistake. After all, Nineveh fell long before the classical Greek world rose. By the time of Herodotus and Strabo it lay in ruins, while Babylon still stood, however, faded in stone and memory. Daly followed the water. She traced the ancient canals of northern Mesopotamia, the vast Joan aqueduct, a limestone marvel inscribed with Sennacherib's name, capable of diverting rivers across valleys and into his capital. She studied the palace texts, which described flora from across the empire, arranged in deliberate beauty. To her, the evidence was clear. Nineveh was home to the gardens. But here again, the mystery remains open, because while Nineveh offers inscriptions and waterworks, Babylon offers the legend. Coldwell's vaults still stand, stubborn in their ambiguity. Tourists walk through them, listening to guides speak of Nebuchadnezzar and Emmet, and the air hums with the question, could this have been it? Or are we looking in the wrong place entirely? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Perhaps there were multiple gardens, grand and terraced, built by more than one king. Perhaps the Greeks receiving tales from merchants, soldiers, priests blended stories into one, folding Nineveh into Babylon like overlapping dreams. And perhaps the very act of searching, of digging beneath ruins and doubt, is the real gift the gardens gave us. They invite us to imagine, to question, to walk ancient paths with modern feet, seeking not just stones, but stories. The Hanging Gardens, whether in Babylon, Nineveh, or elsewhere, remind us that not all truths are found in stone. Some live in the spaces between, in the vaults that could be cellars or foundations, in the bricks that hold both fact and fable, and in the silence of things that choose not to reveal themselves fully. Now, dear dreamer, we leave the dig sites and return to the currents of thought and belief. For the next chapter explores not where the gardens were, but what they meant. Beyond the bricks and buried arches, beyond the chisel marks of stone and the shifting banks of rivers, there lies a deeper layer to the tale of the Hanging Gardens, a truth not bound by geography or confirmed by excavation. It is the truth of meaning. For to the ancients, a garden was never just a place to walk or rest. It was a sacred threshold, a symbolic microcosm of the universe, a controlled wilderness in which nature bowed to design, and the divine brushed gently against the mortal world. Tonight, we wander through this more symbolic garden. Let your thoughts drift now from Babylon and Nineveh as cities, and instead see them as ideas, concepts of order amidst chaos, of sacred geometry laid upon wild soil. For in the ancient world, to garden was to imitate the gods. The earliest mythology, Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, all speak of paradise gardens. These were often imagined as sacred enclosures, places of first creation, filled with abundant trees, flowing water, and perfect harmony. The Sumerians called such a place the Eden, a term meaning steppe or plain, but later translated by cultural memory into Eden. In these primordial gardens, the gods walked, kings were born, fate was written beneath the leaves of sacred trees. The Hanging Gardens, then, were not merely ornamental. They were architectural prayers. Imagine, if you will, the structure not just as a wonder of stone and flora, but as a temple to memory, a living mountain raised not by tectonic force but by human devotion. Each terrace, each level, climbing like a ladder toward the heavens, evoking the sacred mountain motif found across civilizations. From the ziggurat, Babylon's own mountain of God, to the stepped pyramids of the Maya and the sacred peaks of the Himalayas, Humanity has long built upward to reach inward. The hanging gardens belong to this same instinct, the vertical yearning for transcendence. But here, the ascent is green. The trees planted in rows tended by invisible hands do more than shade the soil. They mirror the tree of life, a recurring symbol in Mesopotamian art and myth. Often flanked by winged beings or genies holding pine cones and watering jars, the tree of life represented fertility, kingship, and divine harmony. In the hanging gardens, that symbol becomes physical. Dozens of trees, lifted into the air, fed by hidden water, swaying above the dusty city like a living crown. What does it mean to raise a garden into the sky? It is an act of defiance, yes, against the arid heat, against the entropy of the desert. But it is also an act of invocation, a sacred imitation of divine creation. Just as the gods made order from chaos, so too did the architects of the hanging gardens impose structure upon the wild, not to dominate nature, but to harmonize with it, to guide its growth into beauty, to coax from it a vision of eternity. And in this sacred act, the king becomes more than a ruler. He becomes a gardener priest, a steward of paradise, a figure not just of might, but of mystery. Whether it was Nebuchadnezzar, Sennacherib, or another forgotten builder, the creator of the goddess participated in an ancient tradition that saw architecture as ritual. Consider the water. In Mesopotamian cosmology, water was the primordial substance, the source of all things. The god Ea or Enki ruled these subterranean waters, known as the Apsu. It was from this watery abyss that life arose. To lift water upward, to channel it through hidden channels and up into the air, was to reverse the flow of origin. It was to mimic creation in reverse, bringing the deep waters of chaos into the realm of air and light. The hanging gardens, in this light, were more than marvels. They were metaphors, rivers raised to the heavens. The Apsu reimagined as rainfall. To walk beneath their boughs, to hear the gurgle of unseen water, was to experience a myth made manifest. And for those who believed in the sacred power of space, every detail of the gardens would have been deliberate. The orientation of the terraces to the sun, the selection of plant species with medicinal, magical, or symbolic resonance, the use of color green for rebirth, blue for divinity, gold for the eternal. Perhaps even the number of terraces held meaning. 4 for the corners of the world, 7 for the planets, 9 for the sacred numbers whispered in priestly rites. To walk the hanging gardens was to walk through cosmic order. And this experience, dear dreamer, was not reserved for kings alone. Those who glimpsed the gardens even from a distance may have felt a stirring, a sense that the world, so often chaotic and cruel, could be shaped into grace. That somewhere, high above the dusty markets and clamor of cities, there bloomed a place where time slowed, where the divine touched earth. Such places are rare, but they endure in memory. Even now, across cultures, gardens remain symbols of peace, refuge, and eternity. From the Persian Paradise, the walled garden of paradise, to the Zen gardens of Japan, to the cloistered rose gardens of medieval monasteries, we continue to craft green spaces that reflect our deepest longing for harmony. The hanging gardens of Babylon, whether real or remembered, belong to this lineage. They are not just one of the 7 wonders. They are the 8th gate's invisible mythic, ever opening inward, a portal between what is and what could be. As we step now from the symbolic into the celestial, let us follow the ancient gaze upward toward the stars, and the role they may have played in the garden's design. As the sun sets over ancient Babylon, its red-gold light slipping beneath the flat horizon, another light awakens above. The sky blooms with stars, thousands of them each a burning thread in the grand tapestry of the heavens. To the ancient Mesopotamians, this celestial dome was not just a sky. It was a calendar, a divine script, a message from the gods. And it is here, dear dreamer, where our next mystery unfolds. Could the hanging gardens have been more than a work of architecture and love? Could they have been a map not of lands or kingdoms, but of the sky? Let us wander upward. The Babylonians were among the first astronomers. From as early as 1800 BC, their priests called Beru and Tupshar recorded the movements of planets, stars, and eclipses. They carved their observations onto clay tablets, some of which survive even now. Their night sky was populated with gods and omens, each constellation a living being, each eclipse a divine whisper. From the ziggurats of their cities, they studied the sky. The Etamananki, that step tower of Babel, was not just a monument, it was a tool, a way to climb closer to the stars, to observe, to interpret, to listen. So, too, might the hanging gardens have had a celestial purpose. Imagine the terraces now, not merely layered gardens, but celestial platforms. From each level, the sky would open in a slightly different way. Trees would part, fountains would hush, and above the constellations would emerge in quiet procession. Each terrace could have framed a portion of the heavens. The eastern horizon, where Venus rose like a jeweled queen. The southern sky, home to Anu's path, where gods of destiny moved among the stars. The north, where the plow, precursor to the Big Dipper, circled the sky in eternal vigil. Could the gardens have acted as a giant observatory? This is not mere speculation. In ancient Mesopotamia, temples and palaces were often aligned with solar or stellar phenomena. The Akkadian king Naram-Sin claimed divine kingship through celestial association. The Sumerians built their sacred precincts along cardinal directions, aligning entrances to solstices and equinoxes. The very act of building upward in stages invites cosmic thought. As we ascend each level, we leave the concerns of the earthly world below. Dust and noise fall away. Wind replaces weight, and when we reach the highest tier, we meet the stars, not from the ground but almost as equals. In this way, the gardens become a ladder, not only a monument of love, but a path of initiation. Each plant chosen not just for fragrance or beauty, but for symbolism. The date palm sacred to Inanna, goddess of love and war. The fig tree, symbol of wisdom and fertility. The cedar, beloved by the gods, often planted in temples and associated with mountains of creation. And at night, each leaf might have trembled beneath starlight, each branch casting shadows aligned with constellations. Perhaps the builders knew how the moonlight fell between trellises during the equinox. Perhaps they planted flowers that bloomed in harmony with lunar cycles. There is another theory, gentle and beguiling. Some scholars propose that ancient royal gardens were arranged according to astrological signs, where the garden became a reflection of paradise, structured by divine order. In those later gardens, there are often 4 quadrants, representing the 4 rivers of Eden, the 4 cardinal directions, the 4 elements. Could the hanging gardens have echoed such a structure? It is possible that the terraces were not random, but mathematically designed a silent geometry through which the stars moved with intentional rhythm. A visitor walking those paths would not simply enjoy beauty, but experience alignment, a place where time slowed, where the movement of Saturn could be felt in the coolness of shade, where the rise of Orion meant it was time to harvest dates, where the spiral of the Milky Way mirrored the spiral of water wheels lifting life's sky. And here, dear dreamer, we encounter something deeper still, a notion whispered by mystics and astronomers alike, that by gazing upward, we remember who we are, that the cosmos is not separate from us, but reflected within us. In the hanging gardens, those twin mirrors earth and sky may have met, a sacred a place where the green of the earth and the black velvet of the cosmos folded into each other, a reminder that beauty is not found only in what we see, but in what we feel beneath the stars. We may never know if the gardens were truly built with celestial purpose, but to the ancients who walked their imagined paths, the stars were always near, not just overhead but in their stories, in their calendars, in their dreams. And so, the hanging gardens remain suspended not only in air, but in time and thought, a structure as much for the heavens as for the earth. As we descend now from the terrace, the stars still glitter above, the waters still fall, and the scent of jasmine remains. In our next chapter, we drift further into cultural echoes, as the image of the hanging gardens ripples through art, religion, and legend far beyond Mesopotamia. As centuries turned and empires fell like petals from a forgotten tree, the hanging gardens did not wither, though the bricks may have crumbled and the waters run dry. The vision endured, growing not in soil, but in story. In this chapter, dreamer, we follow the long shadow of the hanging gardens as it stretches beyond Babylon, beyond Nineveh, into distant lands and later hearts. For though their origin may be cloaked in ambiguity, their legacy is luminous. We begin in Persia, where the very word for paradise, paradisement, walled garden. This term would, through the slow alchemy of language, become paradise in Greek, Latin, and eventually English. The Persians, inheritors of Mesopotamian wisdom, believed deeply in the power of gardens as sacred. Under the Achaemenid dynasty, kings such as Cyrus and Darius constructed vast pleasure gardens with terraces, irrigation, and symbolic flora. Their gardens were designed as microcosms of the universe spaces, where order triumphed over wilderness, where flowing water mirrored the rivers of creation, and where the king walked as both ruler and caretaker of divine harmony. It is possible, likely even, that the image of the hanging gardens influenced these Persian designs. After all, the Persians had conquered Babylon. They walked its ruins. They would have heard its stories, and they, too, would have longed to build heaven on earth. From Persia, the influence flowed westward, to the Greeks, who already spoke of the gardens in their own writings. The idea took root not only as fact, but as inspiration. In their philosophical imagination, a garden was not only a place of leisure, it was a place of thought. Plato taught in a grove. Epicurus welcomed students into his garden. The very act of learning was tied to green space, to stillness, to shade. In this sense, the hanging gardens were a prototype, a mythical space where the intellect could flower like vines along stone walls. The Romans, inheritors of Greek culture, took the dream even further. Their villa gardens, especially those of the elite, were architectural marvels, symmetrical, lush, filled with fountains and pergolas. Some even employed terracing, echoing the structure long described in Tales of Babylon. Poets like Virgil and Ovid spoke of sacred groves and eternal springs. The ideal Roman garden was not just cultivated, it was philosophical, a refuge from the world's chaos. Here again, the spirit of the hanging gardens whispered through design. But the dream did not end in classical antiquity. As Islamic civilization blossomed, so too did the concept of the sacred garden. In cities such as Baghdad, Damascus, and later Mughal India, rulers commissioned sprawling gardens with quadrants, divided by flowing water, each representing the 4 rivers of paradise as described in the Quran. These gardens were places of prayer and poetry, of beauty and balance. The Shalimar Gardens of Lahore, the Alhambra in Andalusia, the Chahabogavis, all bore within them the ancient echo that a garden could be more than earthly, it could be eternal. And through it all, the story of the hanging gardens lingered in books and memory. Medieval Europe, though far removed from Babylon's sands, knew of the gardens through the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Illuminated manuscripts from monasteries in France, Germany, and Italy carried stylized illustrations of a towering, terrace garden, often surrounded by angels or crowned with heavenly light. To the Christian mind, the hanging gardens blurred with Eden. They became symbols of the lost perfection that humanity once knew, and might know again. In time, the tale wove itself into art, theater, and even opera. During the Renaissance, artists began to paint fantastical versions of the gardens. Always towering, always blooming, they became a backdrop for classical stories, love tales, and epic longing. By the 18th century, the Enlightenment brought skepticism to many ancient claims. Scholars questioned the garden's reality. Geographers debated its placement. Archaeologists searched for its stones. But even as the reality was doubted, the beauty of the idea grew. In the 19th century, Romantic poets revived interest in the East. William Blake, Lord Byron, and others saw in Babylon a symbol of lost grandeur. The hanging gardens became for them a metaphor of dreams, of human striving, of the tension between decay and desire. Even in the industrial age, as cities turned to steel and smoke, the longing for green towers remained. And now, in our own time, the image continues to evolve. Architects speak of vertical gardens, green skyscrapers, living walls. In cities like Singapore, Milan, and Dubai, buildings rise wrapped in foliage, modern echoes of ancient hopes. And in these structures, half glass, half forest, we sense the continuation of a dream begun in dust and sun, perhaps under the hands of Nebuchadnezzar or Sennacherib, now reborn in silicon and steel. We cannot say whether the hanging gardens ever existed in the form described by ancient writers, but we can say with certainty, they have never stopped existing, because every garden built in longing, every tree planted in memory, every drop of water lifted skyward to bring shade to someone's sorrowed heart, these are the hanging gardens, blooming again and again. They are reflections, not just of ancient structures, but of eternal desires. The desire to rise, to remember, to remake the world, if only for a moment, into something green and ordered and at peace. Now, dreamer, let us drift inward, past the echoes of time, into the myths and meanings that tie the garden not only to place but to the soul itself. Not all gardens grow in the soil. Some bloom in silence, in memory, in yearning. As we leave behind the physical structures of Babylon, the aqueducts of Assyria, and the ornate gardens of Persia and Andalus, we find ourselves wandering into a different space altogether, a place not mapped in stone or time, but in the human spirit. This is the inner garden. The hanging gardens, whether built or only dreamed, have lived not just in texts and architecture, but deep within you, smired in our private longings, our search for peace, and our hunger for the eternal. Across cultures, across centuries, the garden has always stood as more than vegetation and stone. It is a symbol of harmony between chaos and cosmos, of soul made visible. The ancient Sumerians believed in the Eden, a place of origin, a perfect field where divine beings first shaped the world. Later, in the Genesis tradition, this evolved into the Garden of Eden, a space untouched by toil or decay, where humans walked alongside the divine. It is no coincidence that the fall of man in that story is marked not by the collapse of a kingdom, but by banishment from a garden. This tells us something powerful. To lose a garden is to lose a state of being. The hanging gardens, then, are not only a wonder of the world, they are a longing for a return to order, beauty, and sacred proximity. To be surrounded by green, by falling water, by the quiet hum of life growing in symmetry, is to feel again that we are part of something vast, harmonious, and good. The mystics of many traditions understood this. In Sufi poetry, the garden is often the metaphor for the divine beloved. In Christian mysticism, the soul is called a hortus conclusus, a walled garden in which Christ dwells. In Taoism, nature is not separate from self, but the very pattern of the way. And in Buddhist practice, the garden becomes the mind's mirror, place where clarity blooms and weeds are gently removed through meditation and breath. To build a garden, then, is to tend not only to the earth, but to the interior world. Perhaps this is what Nebuchadnezzar, or whoever birthed the hanging gardens, truly understood, that to lift trees into the sky was not just an act of love or engineering, but of devotion, a ritual expression of soul, a reflection of the cosmic desire to bring order out of formlessness, beauty out of burden, green out of dust. In our modern world, we still seek this. When life becomes too loud, too fast, we retreat to quiet spaces. We plant houseplants in city apartments. We create tiny balconies of green among towers of glass. We download meditation apps that mimic the sounds of falling water. We walk slowly through arboretums and nature trails, seeking something ancient. These are not loud. They are remembrances, echoes of a truth buried deep within us, that we are never more human than when we are in the garden. Not only the garden around us, but the garden within us, the inner hanging garden, terraced spaces in the mind where dreams cascade downward like ivy, where love, memory, grief, and hope grow side by side, where water flows from unseen sources, perhaps from tears, perhaps from wonder. And in this place, you may find your own amethysts, your own mountain of longing. You may find a terrace where a child once laughed, a fountain echoing a word never spoken, a tree bearing the fruit of some lost idea. The inner garden holds all of it, and just as it takes care to build and maintain a physical garden, so too must the inner garden be tended. We must remove what no longer grows. We must prune the overgrown fear, nurture the seed of peace, and water the dry soil of memory. Each breath becomes a breeze in this place, each moment of stillness an act of gardening. In many ancient rituals, before speaking to the gods, the priests would cleanse themselves, anoint their heads, and walk barefoot through sacred gardens. There, they would wait for the divine to whisper among the leaves. Perhaps the hanging gardens, too, were such a place, not only to see but to listen, not only to admire but to remember who we are, where we come from, what still waits to bloom within us. As you lie here now, drifting between thought and dream, ask yourself, what grows in your inner garden? What vines are reaching for the sun? What pools are waiting to reflect the stars? What is blooming in silence? Even if we never find the true hanging gardens, no inscriptions, no roots, no stones, we will always have this garden, suspended in the soul, a miracle unfolding in the quiet. And so, dreamer, we carry on. In the next chapter, we return once more to the myths, those delicate threads that weave garden and legend together across time, tying Babylon not just to history, but to the eternal tapestry of human meaning. In every age, where records fall silent and facts retreat, myth steps forward, not to deceive, but to complete, to shape the inexpressible into story, to carry what cannot be measured in meters or dated in years, but is felt like fragrance, like longing, like the hush of twilight in a blooming courtyard. The hanging gardens, dreamer, are not merely history's riddle. They are myth incarnate, and in this chapter we sink into that myth not to unearth facts, but to listen to truths told in symbol. Let us begin with the story of Nebuchadnezzar and Amitisa, king and his queen, a man of walls and warfare and a woman of wild forests and memory. Their tale, whether real or imagined, became the archetype of devotion shaped in architecture. In this myth, the garden is more than gesture, it is transformation. A mountain created from flat earth, a forest conjured in the heart of desert. It is a sacred act of remaking the world for another's joy. It is also the ancient truth that love remakes landscapes. From this tale emerges a deeper mythic pattern, the sacred union of opposite. Babylon, dry and ordered, meets media, lush and free. Stone meets seed, fire meets water, king meets queen, and from their fusion rises the Gardana, symbol of balance, harmony, and creative power. Such myths are not unique to Babylon. Across the world, similar garden legends bloom. In Chinese tradition, there is the peach blossom spring, a hidden valley where time stands still and peace reigns eternal. Travelers who stumble upon it forget their worries, but once they leave, they can never return. It is a place of unreachable serenity, much like the lost garden of Babylon. In Hindu lore, there is Nandana, the divine garden of Indra, king of the gods. It is described as rich in celestial flowers, intoxicating perfumes, and trees that grant immortality. It is not merely beautiful, it is spiritually nourishing. In the Quran, paradise is often described as a garden beneath which rivers flow, a motif not far from the imagery of the hanging gardens. The garden becomes the symbol of divine reward, peace, and reunion with the Creator. And in the Greek world, there is the legend of the Garden of the Hesperides, a distant, lush realm where golden apples grow under the care of nymphs, guarded by a dragon and kissed by the last light of the setting sun. It, too, is a place of mythic beauty and sacred test. All these stories share a core, the garden as threshold. It stands between worlds, between the earthly and the divine, the known and the forgotten. It is the place where heroes pause, where lovers meet, where gods descend, where dreams root themselves and grow. The hanging gardens of Babylon sit within this constellation of sacred spaces, Whether they were ever built of brick and blossom matters less than what they represent. They are the echo of Eden, the architecture of hope, and like all great myths, they invite interpretation. To some, they are a story of power of a king so mighty he could make the desert bloom. To others, a tale of love of one who built a paradise to soothe his beloved's sorrow. To still others, a metaphor of the soul's climb each terrace, a step closer to light, each leaf a thought, each bloom a prayer. And perhaps all these are true. The myth of the Hanging Gardens grows, like ivy, around what little we know. It fills in the blanks. Yes, but more importantly, it gives us space to wonder. In a world so focused on evidence, the garden reminds us of the beauty of mystery. Its lack of proof is not failure, but invitation. For what is a myth if not the voice of humanity dreaming aloud? And in dreaming of the Hanging Gardens, we dream of restoration, of transformation, of healing and harmony and hope. We dream of what might yet be built, even now, in a world thirsting for beauty. Let us not ask, did they exist? Let us ask, why do we need them to? What part of our soul reaches toward the vision of green leaves spilling down stone, of water lifted to kiss the sky, of a queen's tears turned to blossoms? We need these stories, dreamer, not because they are always true, but because they speak truths we struggle to voice. The Hanging Gardens, like all enduring myths, give shape to the unspeakable yearning within Usta, desire for something sacred, suspended, and serene, something worth building, something worth remembering. As we close this chapter, we prepare to drift into other dreams, those of mirrors and mirrors, of cities confused, stories merged, and how the Hanging Gardens became not one memory. Beneath the ancient sun of Mesopotamia, time does strange things. Cities collapse and are buried. Names are forgotten. Rivers change their paths, but stories drift like vapor, rising from one city's ruin to shimmer over another's dome, settling wherever memory will hold them. So it is with the Hanging Gardens. In this chapter, we explore how Babylon's most famous wonder may not have been Babylonian at all, how memory may have mirrored itself, reflecting from place to place, generation to generation, until fact and fable danced like sunlight on the Euphrates. Let us begin again not with Babylon, but with Nineveh. To the north of Babylon, along the Tigris River, the Assyrian capital of Nineveh once stood in rival ground. Where Babylon was known for its cosmic design and temple towers, Nineveh boasted royal precision, military might, and architectural innovation. Here ruled King Sennacherib, a monarch whose ambition equaled that of Nebuchadnezzar, but whose legacy until recently has been less romanticized. Sennacherib's inscriptions, however, offer something extraordinary. They describe a garden grand-tiered, lush planted within his palace at Nineveh. He writes of trees from distant mountains, of rare flora gathered from across the empire, of water brought from the Kaba River through a system of canals, aqueducts, and even a device akin to a screw pumper technology centuries ahead of its time. He does not call it hanging, but he does describe trees growing on elevated terraces, soil resting upon vaulted stone platforms, and water delivered to the uppermost levels. All of this sounds strangely familiar. This discovery gave rise to the Sennacherib theory, championed most famously by Dr. Stephanie Dalley. According to her work, it was not Nebuchadnezzar who built the Hanging Gardens, but Sennacherib in Nineveh, not Babylon. And the name Babylon, she reminds us, was sometimes used by later writers as a generic term for impressive Mesopotamian cities, especially by the Greeks, who wrote about the Hanging Gardens long after the fall of both empires. In this view, the Gardens of Babylon are a mirage, a reflection of Nineveh's reality, projected southward by the lens of myth, confusion, and time. But even if this is true, the mystery only deepens. Why did the world come to believe it was Babylon? Why did poets, travelers, and scholars for millennia anchor this floating vision to the city of Nebuchadnezzar, rather than to the halls of Assyria? It may be because Babylon had already captured the world's imagination. Its ziggurats, its gates of blue-glazed lions, its central role in biblical prophecy, all of these lent the city a mystical gravity. When the Greeks and later chroniclers heard tales of wondrous gardens in the east, they naturally attached them to Babylon. In the mirror of collective memory, Nineveh's image was reflected refracted until it became Babylon's own. But even this may not be the full story, for within the dream of the Hanging Gardens lie elements from many places, layered over centuries. There are the Persian paradisa walled sanctuaries of shade and fruit. There are the sacred groves of the Sumerians, the terrace farming of the stepped gardens of India, even the water gardens of Egypt, where ponds reflected the stars and lotuses opened with the rising sun. Perhaps the Hanging Gardens were not a single construction, but a composite dream, a myth born not of one city, but of many, a wonder shaped by the echoes of different cultures, each adding a brick, a vine, a drop of water until the idea became universal. Like a mirage, they shimmered across regions and eras, always just out of reach, yet always visible. The Hanging Gardens, then, are not only a mystery of location, but of interpretation. They reflect the way humans tell stories. We are not always precise. We blend, we borrow, we embellish, but in doing so, we preserve the essence. And the essence of the Hanging Gardens is this: somewhere once humanity defied the earth and lifted beauty into the air, whether in Babylon or Nineveh, stone or dream. The truth is not just where the garden stood, but what they stood for. They weren't our mirror of desire, of the soul's quiet hunger for paradise regained. In their many reflections, we find the contours of ourselves, scattered, layered, and yet reaching upward, always upward towards something blooming beyond the dust. Now, dreamer, as we prepare to enter the final arc of our journey, we will turn inward once more, not to the past, but to the meaning of wonder itself, and how the Hanging Gardens remain relevant in the architecture of the human spirit. Wonder is a bridge of structure not built of stone or steel, but of breath, a moment of stillness stretched across the chasm of understanding. It is that pause between what is known and what is felt, between reality and awe. And among the 7 wonders of the ancient world, none embodies this breathless pause more perfectly than the Hanging Gardens. In this chapter drama, we step beyond location, beyond history and myth, into the timeless realm where wonder itself is architecture, where the Hanging Gardens do not exist on the map but in the space they open inside us. Let us begin with the concept of wonder as the ancients understood it. The Greek word for wonder, dome, does not only mean marvel or curiosity, it also connotes terror, majesty, a force that unsettles, precisely because it challenges what we believe the world to be. The Hanging Gardens, whether witnessed or only imagined, inspired this kind of awe. How could plants soft, damp, delicate thrive atop stone towers under a brutal sun? How could water, heavy and fluid, rise against gravity without pipes, without pumps, without electricity? How could man recreate nature in the sky? These questions are not practical. They are spiritual. They ask, what is possible when beauty is prioritized, when comfort is not the goal, but transcendence? In this way, the Hanging Gardens are akin to every sacred structure, to the temples of Angkor Wat, aligned with the soul, to the pyramids of Giza, tracking celestial passage, to the cathedrals of Europe, whose spires reach like prayers into the sky. Each of these is more than a building. It is an expression of longing, and longing, dear dreamer, is the root of all wonder. The Hanging Gardens were, above all else, a response to longing. If we believe the tale of Amethyst, it was longing for home. If we believe the engineers, it was longing for mastery. If we believe the poets, it was longing for paradise. And if we believe the myth makers, it was longing for a better world, a place where the harsh lines of empire softened under vines, where war paused beneath jasmine-scented shade, where silence and greenery defied the dust. To construct such a place, whether in Babylon, Nineveh, or the human heart, is to assert hope. This is the architecture of wonder. It requires vision beyond blueprint, patience beyond policy, belief beyond borders. Even now, when we design green buildings, floating cities, suspended bridges, we are drawing from the same sacred impulse, the desire to blend technology with tenderness, stone with leaf, power with peace. The Hanging Gardens remind us that art is not accidental. It is crafted, it is watered, it is raised sometimes painfully against the pressure of practical thinking. In our current world, so often compressed by speed, utility, and noise, the very concept of the Hanging Gardens feels radical. To build something just to soothe, just to reflect the stars and soften the sun. This is not a waste. It is wisdom. It is remembrance that we are not only meant to survive, we are meant to feel the breath catch when walking into a space that is more than shelter. It is story, more than architecture it is offering. The Hanging Gardens was such a place, and perhaps that is why they continue to haunt us. We do not want them to be lost, because we do not want the idea of them to die. Because the moment we stop building places that inspire, that comfort, that elevate the soul, we forget something essential. We forget to dream. As we near the final chapters of our journey, we move from the mystical and mythic into the personal, into how the Hanging Gardens touch not just the past or the page, but the sleeper, the seeker, the soul wandering beneath stars in search of serenity. Close your eyes, dreamer. Imagine waking in the cool hush before dawn, the air perfumed with myrrh and damp leaves. Somewhere nearby, waterfalls in slow rhythm, not with force, but with grace, like a lullaby still echoing from the stars. You rise and walk barefoot across sun-warmed stone. Above you, vines trail like fingertips from unseen hands. Flowers nod as you pass. A fig tree offers shade and sweetness. And from the highest terrace you see it all, a city below, a river beyond, and sky above, touched by green. You are not in history now. You are in the space between, in the place where dreams take root. This, perhaps more than anything, is the enduring power of the Hanging Gardens, not their scale, not their mystery, but the way they dwell in imagination. In the quiet heart of every person lies a vision of refuge, a space untouched by conflict, a private Eden. For some, it is a forest glade. For others, a hidden cove, a memory garden, a childhood porch beneath an orange tree. And for many, whether they know it or not, it is something like the Hanging Gardens, a suspended world, elevated just above the noise of life. Green, cool, silent, a place to look outward from a gentle height, a place to breathe. The ancients may have dreamed the gardens into existence, but we continue to redream them, generation after generation. When we long for escape, the gardens appear. When we seek healing, they open. When we are burdened by a world that moves too fast and demands too much, they offer stillness. Their terraces become mental sanctuaries, tiered layers of thought and emotion, each level rising toward clarity. We climb them in dreams, step by contemplative step, until we reach the uppermost terrace, where even thought becomes quiet. Perhaps this is why the Hanging Gardens are so difficult to locate. They were never meant to be found in soil. They were meant to be entered within, in dreams, in poetry, in those rare moments of awe when architecture meets soul. Psychologists speak of liminal spaces, thresholds where transformation is possible. The garden is one such space. Neither wild nor tame, neither temple nor home, a borderland between what is and what might be. The Hanging Gardens are the ultimate liminal space. You do not dwell there forever. You visit, you pass through, you gather peace like blossoms and bring it back into the waking world. In this way, the gardens are not escape, they are restoration, like a breath held too long and then released. You do not need to believe in their physical existence to be moved by them. You only need to recognize that you have already stood in them each time you found yourself still before beauty, or held in a hush, not of silence, but of sacred presence. Each time you planted a flower in memory of someone lost. Each time you paused beneath trees and remembered who you were before the noise. These are the Hanging Gardens, not seen with the eyes, but felt with the soul's skin. In our modern language, we often speak of self-care, meditative spaces, nature therapy, but the ancients had no need for such terms. They built the Hanging Gardens. They understood that to shape the world in harmony is to shape the self. As we walk now through this final terrace of meaning, we carry the gardens with us, not behind, but within, a green stillness folded into the fabric of our thought. A reminder that even in a desert, beauty can be lifted, that love can be made into architecture, that peace can be cultivated not by fleeing the world, but by elevating it, one vine, one stone, one breath at a time. The dreamer who steps into the Hanging Gardens is not merely an observer. You are its gardener. As we prepare to leave this sanctuary and begin our quiet descent into sleep, let us pass through one final gate. The next chapter leads us into the twilight of this journey, a peaceful return, a soft farewell, and a blessing whispered by the leaves themselves. The gardens rise no longer. Now, dreamer, they gently descend. The sun lowers in the sky, casting gold upon the terrace stones. The shadows lengthen, soft as feathers. Water trickles slower now, like breath before sleep. And the scents of basil, of myrrh, of cedar linger in the cooling air, blending into one last sacred perfume. You've climbed with us, step by step, through history, through myth, through reflection. Now we begin our return not backwards, but inward, toward a place of quiet and peace. Let us walk once more among the imagined trees. On the highest terrace, there were olive branches brushing against a sky now blushing purple. A soft breeze moved the leaves as if they whispered secrets only dusk could carry. The middle terraces held pools of still water, their surfaces reflecting not just the stars, but the feelings carried through centuries: wonder, love, longing. There are waters that remember. And on the lower terraces, where figs and pomegranates grew, the air was warmer, grounded, closer to the heartbeat of the earth. Here, birds once sang. Now they sleep, heads beneath wings. As you descend, you feel no loss, only calm. You do not leave the garden behind. Rather, it folds itself into you. Every step downward carries a blessing. You carry the memory of water rising, defying gravity, sustained by unseen hands. You carry the image of vines trailing from stone, tender and wild. You carry the feeling of being suspended, held gently between the earth and the stars. You carry the knowledge that such a place, whether it stood in brick or breath, is real in the way that all true things are real, because they are felt. The descent is not a fall. It is a return, back to the body, back to rest, back to sleep. As you reach the lowest terrace, the garden gates open not as an end, but as an embrace. The path you now walk leads not away from the garden, but deeper into its heart, because you have become part of it. The garden is not behind you, it is within you. You are its keeper now. You are its dreamer. And so, as night settles fully over Babylon, whether that city stood beneath the Tigris or in the hollows of the soul, we light the final lanterns. We extinguish the thoughts that burn too bright. We let go the Hanging Gardens, descend into stillness, and so do you. But the journey is not yet complete. In the next chapter, we drift into the final reflections of this ancient dreamer, gentle reckoning, a poetic farewell, and the peaceful closing of gates that never truly locked. Night has come. The stars are still and wide, stitched across the velvet of the ancient sky. Babylon sleeps beneath them, its stones warmed by the memory of day. The Euphrates glides in darkness, a slow ribbon of time reflecting glimmers of moonlight. And above it all, far above the dust, the stories, the ruins of hanging gardens continue to bloom in silence. You've walked with us through sand and script, through water wheels and myth, through terraces built by kings and dreamed by poets. Now, here, on the last terrace of memory, we rest. Let us breathe here, where the air is cool and full of echoes. The hanging gardens were always more than place. They were a gesture, a hand reaching out in love, in reverence, in resistance to impermanence. A gift shaped by longing, a wonder carried through time not by stone but by soul. And it is this, dear dreamer, that endures. Not the exact size of the walls, not the technical precision of irrigation, but the feeling that someone, somewhere, once lifted beauty toward the heavens, that someone believed a barren world could be softened by green, that someone raised not only trees, but the very idea of peace made visible. What legacy could be more lasting? In truth, the world is full of ruins. Palaces collapse, scrolls burn, cities vanish beneath rivers, volcanoes, and forgetfulness. But the idea of the hanging gardens persists, precisely because it is rooted in something deeper than stone. It is rooted in the universal human wish to create a place apart, a place of balance, a place of care, a place where the harshness of the world does not win. We see this today not in ancient brickwork, but in green rooftops blooming in crowded cities, in refugees who plant flowers in the dust outside their tents, in hospital rooms where a single orchid softens the sterile cold. In those quiet corners of the mind we return to when the noise grows too loud. The hanging gardens were never only in Babylon. They are in every act of tender defiance. They are in every soul that chooses to cultivate beauty where none is expected. You, too, are capable of building gardens, not just with soil, but with intention, with breath, with silence, with care. As we now close the gate behind us, we do not forget the path we've taken. We walk slowly, carrying the scent of fig leaves, the sound of falling water, the dappled shadow of branches across stone. And when the world becomes too much again, you will know where to return. To the place above the city, to the place between dream and daylight, to the hanging gardens of your own making. Let them rise within you. Let them soften the edges. Let them root you in wonder. Let them remind you that something sacred always survives. Even when walls fall, and towers fade, and names are lost, the garden grows, quietly, faithfully. And now, dear dreamer, we come to the final breath of our journey. The lanterns are dimmed. The garden lies quiet. The waters still fall, somewhere in the distance, but softer now, like memory dissolving into sleep. The hanging gardens, whether real or dreamed, have led us gently across the century, through Babylon's forgotten walls, through Nineveh's flowing canals, through myths shaped by longing, and through the green corridors of your own quiet heart. As this journey draws to a close, let the ancient whispers settle into your consciousness like mist over forgotten ruins, not to weigh you down, but to cradle you gently. You have wandered far, through time, through stone, through the shimmering layers of story. And though we leave behind the names and places, the essence remains with you, folded into the corners of your breath, tucked beneath the roots of your thoughts. For wonder, once touched, is never lost. The mysteries we've explored tonight are not just relics, they are reminders that peace can be cultivated, that beauty is a form of resistance, that even in arid lands, gardens may rise, and that the softest things shade, water, stillness, soften, endure the longest. If tonight's journey has brought you peace, consider returning. This path, through history and dream, is always open. Subscribe, if you wish, and let the soft chime of new mysteries greet you each week like wind through fig leaves. And share with us, fellow dreamer, from what distant shore, from what quiet room, from what corner of the world you joined us tonight. Let this circle of seekers grow, united not by time or place, but by the gentle pull of curiosity. Until we meet again, in gardens yet unnamed, may your rest be deep and undisturbed. May your dreams bloom like jasmine in the dark. May your breath flow like water through unseen aqueducts. And may you always remember, somewhere, the hanging gardens are still growing. Sleep well, dreamer, and let the ancient wisdom guide your dreams. Fade gently, now the water falls, the vines sway, the stars watch, and all is still.